Hello and welcome to the Burn Your Boats podcast. Today we're going to tackle a subject, parenting. Now, it's not a subject you hear every single day on real estate podcasts, and yet real estate can have the profoundest of impacts on your experience of being a parent or if you're considering having children. So today we unpack what life looks like for a 35, 40-year-old professional who doesn't have kids and a 50-year-old real estate investor who does have kids. It's a very interesting topic. We get into some emotional conversations about what parenting really requires. For a lot of people, they think it's all about money and success. It's actually not. It's about time and attention. And how do you create time and attention as a parent for your children? So this is a vital subject. And if you are a parent or if you're considering being a parent, we think today's episode is an absolute must listen. So without further ado, let's break it open. Let's have this conversation, and we hope you enjoy the episode.
Welcome to the Burn Your Boats podcast. Playbook to engaged parenting. Early investing secures presence. And now, your hosts, Clark Lunt and David Shaw.
All right, welcome everybody to this is going to be a unique episode of the Burn Your Boats podcast that David and I have been kind of chatting about for a while. And we'll kind of start off, David, just to kind of let you know, a peek behind the curtain. Last night, I'm 40 years old, right? And I think I went to bed last night at like 9:30 or got in bed by like 9:15. Everything's quiet, watch a little TV, go to bed. I think I actually took a nap at like 6 o'clock, then went to the gym from 7 to 8, quick dinner, and I feel amazing. I woke up this morning, had some coffee, and felt like $1,000,000. However, we talked a little bit before this, David, and I know you're kind of dragging ass, and I don't understand why you would be dragging ass. I'm not dragging ass, right? So would you tell the listener, David, why you are dragging ass in here today, even with your very colorful Hawaiian shirt that I, of course, appreciate very much?
You know what, Clark? It's not just today. It's every day for the last 9 years. I have been surviving at best. And the reason being, Clark, is 9 years ago, I had my first child.
Gotcha.
Right? And so what we're going to talk about today is children, parenting, and real estate, and why real estate investing is an essential ingredient to parenting. That how put those two things together. It sounds like we're saying barking is an essential part of being a cat.
Right.
Not cats don't bark, right?
Yeah.
But real estate is really one of those things that we hope over the next hour, you, the listener, will appreciate what real estate and what investing does as a parent, and why we invest so early and we take consideration of the full scope of what investing really is, right? So Clark, to the point, I drag my 52-year-old tired ass into this podcast, and you're looking like, you're bouncing around over there. Just for the listeners, what age are you? What's your current focus of what you do at your time? Because I have 3 children, right?
Right.
I have a 3-year-old, I have a 6-year-old, and I have a 9-year-old. And so I work from 5:45 a.m. in the morning till I would probably get them all off by 9 o'clock. They're in bed, straighten up the house, have a cup of tea, talk to my wife for like 15 minutes, and fall our tired asses getting to bed. And that's not just Monday through Friday.
Right.
That's 7 days a week.
There's no break on the weekends for the kids?
No break at the weekend.
Oh.
That's all. It gets hard. The weekends are harder.
Okay.
The weekends are harder because You know,
Right.
they have parties in their home, and there's parenting is the hardest thing by a country mile that I have ever experienced. And so when everyone else is going, oh, you know, it's Labor Day weekend, or, you know, it's vacation time, it's
Right.
Christmas. I'm like, oh no, like, this is going to be really, really hard. It's like 2 weeks of I'm on, I'm on duty for
Yeah.
all of that, as is my wife, right?
Right.
It's like you're 40, you
Yeah.
are essentially, you're in a relationship, but you're not married.
Right.
I look at your life almost like you're a superhero. And so what do you do at your time? What does your time look like? You know, tell me, like, what do you get to do with your time? Because we're going to talk about a little experiment here in a minute. But what are your thoughts on your time? Are you full? Are you full all day long? You're busy?
Yeah, it's something where it makes it, I think it's simpler, and I can do as I please with my time, right? I have my girlfriend that I've been with for a couple of years, and obviously we spend time together, but she has her job and she goes to work and she has different days off than I do. So I have a fair amount of time to myself to be able to focus on, work is certainly a high priority. My health is a high priority. I'm trying to learn Spanish, so I spend a little bit of time on that. And then, just spending time with my friends. Like this past weekend, David, I decided, I met you for some beers on Sunday to go watch the English Premier League games.
Yeah.
And then I just decided to keep hanging out with my friends for longer because I didn't have anything else really that I needed to do. So it is something that I have my time. And I'm also, if and when I have kids, I'm also going to be the 68-year-old dad in the soccer stands yelling at him while everyone else is 28, right? So there's always the other side of the coin that we have to face the music. But as of where I'm currently parked is that it's fairly easy to stay focused on. I don't have to worry about a Zoom call, right? Like you see the Zoom calls during the pandemic where you'd see some super important Zoom meeting and a kid comes running in behind the thing, and then the babysitter comes in running behind that. Like I don't have those kind of challenges, right? So that's kind of just a quick day in the life. And if I need to take a nap before I go to the gym, then I'd take a nap and go to the gym. So
Well, the reason I bring it up, the reason I asked you the question is that I have a fairly front row seat on your life and the
right,
people that you hang out with. And, compliments to you. You hang out with a very, very successful group of people. All right. And you're all, from a male's perspective, you guys are mostly in your mid 40s. Almost all your friends are super successful. So if you are a listener out there and you're in your 30s or 40s and you're not married, you don't have kids, you can probably identify a lot with what Clark's life looks like, right?
right.
Um, but within that, cohort, within your friendship group right now, I asked you just before the podcast, how many of your friends have kids?
Yeah, I was just thinking about taking a poll of kind of my like inner circle and then maybe the next circle out. And I maybe have, two or three fairly close buddies that are, married with kids, and that may represent 10-15%. And ironically speaking, the other, let's call it 70 or 75 or 80%, that don't have kids, it's not it's not much of a topic. I mean, it's not, we're that may be the 10th priority on our list of things we're going to talk about if we're, shooting the breeze on a Saturday afternoon at the beach. So, there seems to be a common trend, especially I think, and I've lived in different cities in my life, and I've noticed that certainly in bigger cities, there seems to be a delay in, maybe settling down with someone, getting married, and then having kids. And where I'm parked in Tampa, Florida, is certainly no different. So
Right. And that's done. The reason we bring this up, right, is particularly in, larger metropolitan areas, where people are in their 30s and 40s and they have really busy careers, and their spouse may have busy careers. And so you may get, boyfriend, girlfriend, or whatever the mix of that might be. But they're both quite successful because this podcast largely is speaking to successful people.
right,
And so we know, and hundreds of people who are in their mid 40s. And this isn't, in some cases isn't even a conversation. But ironically enough, as I look back, you say about 10 or 15% have kids now, but when all is said and done, about 85% of your friends will have kids.
Of course, I think so. That's true.
So there's this thing that's kind of looming over your entire friendship group, and nobody's talking about it. It's like it's being pushed out, like it's a bad smell, or just something the can has been kicked down the road, even in thinking about it, right?
Right.
But and I get it 100%. I had my first child at 44 years of age. So I got all the gags, I got all the like, you're out with your grandparents or your grandkids today. And people come up to us, oh, your grandchildren are beautiful. I'm like, yeah, they're my kids.
Yeah.
So, I don't get to give them away, right?
Right.
But like, I'm going to take this from a male perspective because it can only speak really to myself. Is the reason I think, aware or unaware, that I was at the time that I just refused to either have kids or entertain a conversation or allow the thought get into my head. Because really, as a man, and in, the gender roles as I understand them, is that the man needs to be the provider, right?
Right.
The buck stops with me, right? If all else fails, I need to be able to always be able to provide safety to my spouse. And absolutely, if I was even considering having kids, I felt, and if you, the listener, can recognize this in yourself, I felt I needed millions of dollars before I even considered having kids. I needed $1 million in the bank before I would even entertain the idea of. I needed to be literally financially free.
David, was this common? Was this something that you was just on your own, or was this something within your own kind of network or friend group, or maybe your work, your real estate network had those kind of common kind of thinking, or is that something that was just kind of more in line with what you felt personally?
It was very personal because I didn't have your standard corporate safety net, right? So I've always been in this kind of entrepreneurial, this entrepreneurial journey. And so with an entrepreneurial journey, you've got highs and lows, and there's your business model's working for a while and then it's not. So it's not this steady income. It's not this steady employer. And I can't speak to people who have that steady employment their whole lives. But, to our interview with Devon last week, is like, your boats can be burned at any point in time. I can't imagine being a W-2 income earner and losing my job at 49 because there's cheaper, corporations by and large don't really care about you. Right. And so you've got these 2 or 3 kids that are in your world. So I needed to have that kind of almost like paid for in advance. It's like I've never put stuff on my credit card. Right. So I never wanted to put kids on my credit card. Yeah. I wanted to save up first, buy the car later, right? Yeah. So literally I wanted to save up and then have the kids, right? So as a man, and that was what was going on in my mind. Now, obviously females will have more physical needs and requirements in terms of what age they can have children and can't have children. So that I'm not even going to get into that world. I'm just talking about me as a male. So if you are a male and you're listening to this, it's like maybe you can identify with this concept of like just needing, you never wanted to put your kids on a credit card, that you needed to have a big safety net before. And then there's a second part to it, Clark. You and I have talked about this a lot. It's the pickle jar theory. So there's a really cool YouTube video out there where a college lecturer walks in with a big jar and it's empty. And he empties golf balls in to the big, large jar and asks the attendees to his lecture, is the jar full? Is it full? Yeah. And that looks pretty full to me. And then he takes out the marbles next. Yeah. And does that look full? It's like, yeah, now it's super full. He takes out the little pebbles. Looks super full, right? And so on and so forth. And then he put in the sand. It's like, is it full now? Like, yeah, that's totally full. And then he pours in the water,
Right.
right? Well, that's the other side of why I didn't have kids till I was later in my life, is because I always felt my jar was pretty full. I always felt that the golf balls and the sand and the pebbles, when I look back in hindsight, my life was probably just the jar with the golf balls.
Right.
And then you pour one kid in, and the kid represents the marbles. Then you pour another kid in, maybe represents the pebbles. And then you pour another kid in and represents the water, right?
Right.
And so this idea that, you just don't have the space in your life, that was pretty prevalent with me. And so your friends are not having these conversations either. Do you think the pickle jar theory is part of it? Like you guys are like all, late 30s, mid 40s, super successful people in your entire friendship group. Do you think there's an element of the pickle jar theory going on with your friendship group?
Yeah, I for sure think that, you're saying, you said earlier that I want to have a couple $1,000,000, right? Kind of before I get into it. I think it's like anything, is that I would like to think that all my friends, including myself, want to, and they want to be good dads. They want to be good moms, right? They want to be present. And so I think they know that if they want to get to a point where they are in their career, it's going to be much more difficult if they have kids, in terms of it maybe more financially limiting. They won't be able to focus as much. And so, their career is very high priority, because it goes back to my favorite analogy of the penny that doubles every day for 30 days, and it ends up being $6 or $7 million. And if you start doubling the penny on day 4, and you slow down that, right? Now it only doubles every 4 days instead of every day, because you're having a kid at a much younger age, is that I think it slows down that growth, and you may never be able to get to the 30 full days. You may only get to day 16, which then doesn't leave you with, now you're only doubling $126 instead, $250 or whatever that is. So I think that that's a main kind of thinking, is that I want to be able to become pretty damn successful. And I have a lot of friends that are entrepreneurial minded, right? So they're running their own business. They're digging ditches every day. They've to your point, they've got highs and lows, right? It's a roller coaster of, like, it's not just a consistent W-2 job. But at the same time, they're looking for the much bigger picture, 2 years from now, 4 years from now, what that could turn into. And I think that that's what I've seen with a lot of my network, is that they're kind of delaying the kids, and they're willing to be, as I made the joke earlier, is they're willing to be the guy, with the walker at their 5-year-old kid's soccer game, and like sitting in the stands and having someone help them up to get up. And that's the sacrifice that we're all kind of, it's like a deal you cut with the devil in certain ways, because nothing in life is free, right? And so when the 23-year-old that's got their first kid, and they've slowed down the doubling of the penny each day,
Right.
because they're having their kids earlier, they're going to be very vibrant, running around when they're 40 years old and their kid is 17, right? But at the same time, do they have the time? Do they have the ability to the financial security? And I think that's what, at least my network that I'm seeing, David, is picking that side. I want to have the financial security. I want to be able to take more risks. It's when it's just you and a spouse, a partner, you can take more risks in life, right? You can go on more trips, you can take more business risks, you can buy different real estate. But when you have kids, it's harder. I talked a lot about, like I made a video where I was like, best way to buy your first rental property is to be able to buy a house, and then, buy another house, move into that one, rent out the first one, and then keep rinsing and repeating. That's what I did 3 or 4 times, right? I've got my first 4 houses that way, where I'd move into the next one. Well, if you're tugging along 3 kids, David, could you move right now 2 times in the next 3 years, tugging your 3 kids along? I want to ask you that question. Is that something that you would ever consider?
No.
Of course not, right? So that in itself is something where I think when I speak and I provide, like, well, this is what I did, there's always the asterisk, right? But I don't have any kids, right? So it's like, yeah, it's really easy for me to pick up my bachelor lifestyle with my, my clothes on my back and shove everything in the back of my hatchback, right, and just move to the next place.
Right.
So that is kind of a little bit about what I've seen, and there's both sides of the coin. I don't know if there's one that's right or wrong. It's what's better for you, but at least what I've seen on my side.
Well, we're going to dig into it, right? Because the bottom line is you better be prepared, right? Because kids will run you ragged. And I've got like a funny little anecdote, right? You can have kids, right? When you're young, and you'll have no time because you're just at the start of your career and you're starting to try and do that penny doubling, exactly what
Right.
you just said. You can have money or you can have kids when you're young, but you won't really have the kind of time, but you will have the energy, right? Or you can have them when you're older and you've done this work that you're talking about, you've doubled the penny. And then when you have your kids older, you will have the time to spend with them and be present, but you won't have the energy.
Yeah.
So,
Or as much of
we're
it.
going to dig into that concept now for a minute, because look, having kids is a deep, deep shock to the system. It's the change to your life in pre-kids, post-kids is, again, like the Matrix. Neo's going to take the blue pill, keep everything the same way as it was. I'm going to take the red pill and everything will change. And having kids is taking the red pill, right? And so when kids come into your life, you learn a lot about yourself. You learn a lot about in my case, I was 44. So I got to reflect a lot the previous 44 years of my life, what I was doing with my time. You're 40, I'm 52. So I have been reflecting on that life that I led before kids and the life I now lead with kids. And let me just give you a funny anecdote, right? So I have this thing. It's like your first kid will take your freedom and your free will. There's two of you and there's one of them, right? But you still get to go to your work every day. You can put the kid in daycare. Both of you you and your spouse can still, get stuff done. But your freedom and free will, like you get the kid back at 5 o'clock every day from daycare. You can't just say, let's go out for dinner tonight.
Right.
You can't just say, let's go away for the weekend, right? That last, spontaneous freedom and free will is gone, right? So that's your first kid. Your first kid will take your freedom and your free will. In my experience, everyone else got their own different version of this. But your second kid will take everything that's left. The second kid is the water in the pickle jar theory. Like, no, there's no more space. And second kid comes in and just somehow takes that space. And then a third kid, in my case, I have 3 children. A third kid comes in and takes space that you didn't know existed. But the reality is what space is it taking? It's not, energy cannot be created or destroyed, right? Time cannot be created or destroyed. So I don't have any more time. So what I have had to do, I've had to prioritize things differently. And so working, the concept of working let's say a W-2 job where I have a boss who doesn't understand the life that I now have with 3 kids. Somebody who wanted me in the office at 8 a.m. in the morning, and I had, I was expected to work until 5:30 or later in many people's cases. That's just completely and utterly not possible for me. And the idea of having my wife, in my case, and myself in that scenario where we both worked, W-2 incomes in highly paid corporate jobs, because a lot of people and your friends are going through this experience now, in that, you find yourself super successful in your late 30s and early 40s. You both have great jobs. You're killing it in your career. You have lovely houses. You have nice cars. You have nice vacations. All that. Your life has reached a point that you've worked hard for, but the cost of your life has also reached that point. And so when a child comes into your life, you can't just like have either one of you just like give up your job. Now, there are people who can, right? But we're talking to the people here generally who can't, right? And so what starts giving, right? And that's the part, that's the really, really sad part that we're going to start getting into here, right? Is that what happens when folks are not financially prepared and they're still working, let's say, 2 corporate jobs, and they have high expenses, they have high expectations, like in work, a lot of it is expected of them, but they just can't leave. They can't just say, well, I'm going to give up that job, because they need those jobs, right? And so let me give you an example. So, one of my kids, one of their friends is only kid, his only child. They're both like super successful doctors and surgeons, and they work, I don't know, all the hours of the week, right? They're always working. And so this kid is being brought up by a nanny, essentially. And I can see, almost like the damage that's been done. The child is just gets 5 minutes a week or 5 minutes a day with its parents. And I would imagine a parent, they always look distracted. They're always, they're never present whenever I see them. I would hate to be in that position, as successful as they are, and they beautiful house, and they drive Porsches and all sorts of snazzy cars. But this kid is just, this kid is just hanging in there, And so, look, successful parenting, to my point, I thought I needed the money. But successful parenting is not about the money. It's not about the money at all. Successful parenting is about the time. It's about having the time, drop your kids to school, to be there when it's time to pick them up. My kids, one of my daughters especially, she needs a great deal of one-on-one time to help her with her homework in the evening. She, one of my other kids, he's flying. But one of my daughters, the only way she can get her homework done and, get that extracurricular work that she needs to do, because she needs to do more than the next kid, we have to have one-on-one time. And I'm telling you, it's an hour and a half a day that my wife is just sitting with one of our kids after school every single day of the week, and at weekends. And so I need to be there to give her that space, or we need to have somebody there to pick the other 2 kids up, bring them to after school. So my wife has this other space to be with my child. And so my point is that this is going to happen to you. And you think, oh, we can get an au pair, but an au pair is not going to sit down and do school with your kids. Not right, not correctly, not the way you will, right? And so you can farm it out. Yeah, you can, but you're not going to have the kind of connection you need to have with your parent, with your kids. Because remember, and this is really deep, you will have spent 90% of the time that you will ever spend with your kids by the time they are 18.
That's nuts.
So by the time they're 18, you've only got 10% of the time you will ever spend with your kids left. So if you're busy, to your point, if you're young and you're busy and you're starting your career, and your wife is young and busy, and she's starting her thing, or your spouse or whatever, and you guys are just busy parents, you're probably going to be absent parents, or you're going to be guilty parents, or you're just going to, in your heart of hearts, you kind of know, it's like, yeah, I don't have the time. And it's always about time, right? And so, as I said, successful parenting to me is not about money, right? So if you're there trying to make millions, it's not about money. Well, ironically, it is that money buys you the time, right? But it's all about time, right? They need your time. That's what it is, Clark. Kids need your time. And they don't need like a little bit of your time. They need all of your time. From the moment they wake up in the morning till the moment they go to bed at night, they are looking at you, right? Now, you can fob them off on an iPad or a TV show,
Right.
but you know where that leads, right? So the successful parents aren't going to do that. And so, Clark, this is where I bring you back in again, because real estate investing is, and preparing when you are in your 20s and in your 30s, and indeed in your 40s, preparing for this time in your life when you're going to become a parent, so that you can transition from being Mr. Successful, Mrs. Successful, that you can transition to being a successful parent, because a successful parent has got nothing to do with money. Kids actually aren't that expensive. If you're listening to this and you're wondering, are kids expensive? Let me tell you, they're really not. You buy them all of their shoes and their stuff in Target. They go to school. They don't eat all that much food. They're a little bit more expensive to fly around on airplanes. I'll give you that one. A vacation costs a little bit more than it used to. When I'm buying, 5 full fare tickets to bring them back to Ireland or whatever, right? That's expensive. But outside of that, kids are not expensive. What kids want is they want your time. And so prepare. This is in hindsight. So this isn't something that I had some wizardry over. This is just something as I look back and I'm like, man, I just lucked out. I just happened to be lucky enough to be in the real estate world. And I happened to be lucky enough that I dicked up a fair few real estate renovations, and I ended up having to keep them. Right. And so, but they became the pillars and the cornerstones of what is now my income. Right. And what is now, my net worth, if you will. And so, and it becomes so clear that investing in real estate as young as you possibly can, or if you're older, just investing in real estate for your kids even, right? Or allows parents or would-be parents to transition, allows them to burn their boat, their corporate boat, whatever that thing is, allows them to take that 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 years off. And it doesn't have to be full-time off.
Right.
You just need to be able to have most of your time available to your kids, right? Because if you do invest in real estate and the goal is to transition from your corporate job, right? Or whatever it is taking up all your, it could even be an entrepreneurial job. I was flipping homes. That requires all of your time.
Yeah.
So the investments I made that I held allowed me to take a step back from my entrepreneurial job, right? But it will liberate you to be an effective, present, calm, happy parent, right? Which wouldn't have come easily to me. If I was in the trenches and I was like, no, I need to get that deal. I need to do this. I need to do that. I would have come home. Generally, there'd be like 1,000 things in my head every day. I don't think I'd be an effective, calm, peaceful parent. But I'm here recording a podcast with you. I've managed some rentals, manage some, buy and holds. We do lending, which is an amazing place to make money. But, real estate, basically, Clark, is 3 different things that we talked about before we recorded this episode. So, look, what do you think people need to know about what a real estate journey looks like so that they can be more effective parents when the time comes in their mid-40s, let's say, or in their late 30s, when males in particular, and this absolutely applies to females too, but when males are putting off having kids because they think they need all this money prior to having kids, what is it that we would advise people to be doing in their 20s and 30s, and then let's say their 40s and 50s, maybe to 55 and 55 onwards? What are the 3 main core stages of real estate that can help liberate you so that you're ready for this transition?
Yeah, the kind of the first stage, David, is we talk about like people in their 20s and their 30s, and especially in their 20s. And I hope everyone that's listening to this is in their 20s, and I hope there's a lot of people listening in their 20s, because we talk about all the time is that it's like your superpower. It's like you can take lots of risks. Society doesn't expect a lot of you. You're not required. You don't need to drive some fancy car or live in some like super bougie place or whatever it is. And it's like you're able to take risks, and if they fail, so what? You don't probably have a lot of money anyways. And so in your 20s and 30s, being able to kind of earn as much money as you can and start the process of buying the you have to be able to get your feet wet. You have to be able to step up to the plate and swing the bat and get in the game, right? And for kind of what you're referring to is getting in the game in our world, which we've both seen to be able to impact our lives in an extremely meaningful way, is to be able to start investing in passive real estate.
So look, somebody in their 20s and 30s and 40s are in this kind of unique position. You're in this unique money-making phase of your life, okay? And you are able to take risk. You have an inordinate amount of time on your hands to go out there and really impact the world, build out an entrepreneurial career, build out a corporate career. But I implore you to understand during that period of time, I genuinely implore you to understand that, a 401k, I'm not here to rag on 401ks. I'm not here to rag on any other form of investing, right? But I do implore you to consider that transition, away from maybe not full-time work, but at least to part-time work when you have kids. So you or your spouse, and dare I say you and your spouse, like a really great position to be in is that you're both present and available by the time you have your kids. And so if you are in your 20s or your 30s or even your early 40s, I implore you to start investing. And in our case, we would suggest real estate, but there's obviously other things. I'm not talking about crypto or, any hot streaks, stocks or anything like that. But I would implore you to invest wisely in things that work, right? Things that have history behind them. And with real estate, real estate works by the following algorithm that we've covered in other episodes, which is, take on debt, real estate debt, hold it for a period of time, right? And then do it in scale, so debt by time by scale equals wealth. That wealth equals that step back. So what that wealth does is it's income and net worth, so that when you do have kids in your, late 30s or early 40s, you are well on your way to being able to take a step back from those, all consuming activities, be it W2, be it entrepreneurial stuff where you're just at it all the time. You can, it's your main priority is work, health, and maybe a relationship, but work is certainly well up there. Well, when you have kids, all of that gets demoted. Kids are your number one priority. Hopefully your marriage is your second priority. And then, work and money and all of that is below that, right? So it's not, work and money are no longer at the top of your list of priorities. They're way down. They could be 4 and 5, right? So I invested in real estate, and the people I know who have invested in real estate have had wildly different choices when it comes to parenting in their 40s. And indeed, in my case, I'm in my early 50s. I'm going to be a parent for the rest of my life, right? And so once you have kids, they're forever. They're not just for a minute or two, right? And so when you are in your 20s and 30s, I implore you, get your head out of your, oh, I think this is a good time to invest, or I think that's a bad time, or I think the Fed are going to do this. Stop it. Stop it. Just start putting your name on things like real estate, so that when you're in your 35 to 55 range of your life, then you can start moving to a semi-passive approach. And in our case, we're real estate investors, and it's lovely.
Think about this, right? You mentioned 401k, which I was just listening to a really good podcast on kind of how on the New York Times on the daily podcast about how people are retiring and they've got like 20 or 30 grand in a 401k, and that's not going to be able to last you very long. And just think, if you took the approach when you're 20, you're like, all right, I'm just going to keep maxing out my 401k. I'm going to put as much money as I can in my 401k. Now we're kind of talking about 20s and 30s. I'm 40, right? So it's easy for me to talk about like this. I'm kind of like an old OG millennial, right? And as an old millennial, if I had just been blasting money into my 401k as much as possible, what that doesn't do me any good right now. There's nothing I can do. So then the example would be, David, is like we had our boats burned. I feel like this part of this whole podcast arose from the fact that we used to sell homes that were turnkey to investors, and they would get cash flow, right? And people liked it, and they were maintained well, and they were property managed well, and they had good tenants, and they made money, a couple $100 every month. And then, as we've talked about, and you hear about in the news all the time, the interest rates shot up. It essentially ended that business for us because we couldn't provide cash flowing assets anymore where it was a good business model for us. And if we had just had the one-legged stool, which is, you have a normal job, right? And you essentially get fired. We essentially got fired from our job in an entrepreneurial sense, right? If we hadn't been kind of investing in our 20s and our 30s, we'd be freaking out, running around, trying to figure out the next thing to do, go back to corporate America, do whatever you have to do to survive, right? But because we've been able to kind of make these investments, we've been able to kind of stop. We've been able to smell the roses. We've been able to say, all right, how can we kind of pivot? How can we think again? How can we start a new journey into something else or something that runs parallel with our skill set? And I just know that it would have been very, very tough if I had been in my old kind of like sales job that I had and I hadn't been investing and I was just putting some money in crypto or stocks or whatever it is. I would have been freaking out because the money would have stopped coming in immediately. I wouldn't have had any income coming in off passive investments. And then to be able to then think, what if I had a kid, right? What if I had 2 kids? Then you add even that much more layers of anxiety on top of my already anxiety because of my challenges in my career in terms of where I'm going to go next. So it's like, because we were able to plant those seeds earlier, and those seeds are consistent seeds, right? It's not just like you bought one property and you're done, right? It's like you have to keep doing it maybe every couple of years, stay consistent and say, I'm going to save up X amount of money and I'm going to put it on the next property. And if you keep doing that, the amount of anxiety that you're not going to have, right, is going to be so much better. And then guess what happens? As you have kids, you get to be more present, right? Like you had mentioned that Catherine, your wife, gets to sit down with your daughter for an hour and a half, right? Now, if you could only imagine if Catherine said, well, our boats got burned, we've got to go out and find a job ASAP, and we've been funneling money into a 401k, but we don't want to take it out. We don't want to pay the 10% penalty on it, then pay taxes on it. And so how present is Catherine going to be with your daughter to be able to help her? So you can see the compounding effect, right? Of all of that, those digging those ditches at 25, at 28, at 30, at buying that property that didn't make sense, that only made $16 a month, right? That now makes $616 and has grown by $200K in value. And you've compounded that. Now your daughter has benefited from that because maybe she does need a little bit of extra attention to be able to make sure that she's staying up with the other kids at school, whether it's intellectually, socially, whatever it may be, right?
Yeah.
So just to be able to tie the fact that you started buying rentals earlier in your life, and now your daughter is almost a direct recipient of that, and she gets the present mind of you in Catherine.
Yeah.
I mean, how do you quantify that? How does your daughter quantify that? How do we quantify that on a spreadsheet? But I know that is more important than a lot of the things that we talk about on this podcast with financial and, growing wealth and things like that. But I, as someone that doesn't have any kids, I can empathize with the fact that being there and being present for your kids as they're growing up during the 90% of the time that you're going to spend with them, right? Holy shit, that is so, so important. And you could, I think a lot of parents that are listening to this probably can see like, maybe I'm not present enough. And it's like, but why aren't you present? Is it because you're tired? Is it because you're working a lot? Is it because you're stressed? Because there's a 28-year-old coming for your job and you're 45 years old and maybe you don't have enough legs on the stool. So how do we add more legs on the stool, David? So we're not just on a one-legged stool.
Right. It's so good. Again, if you are a listener here and you don't have kids, but you think kids maybe in your world, start investing, right? And we love real estate. And so start thinking about that because, as I said, between let's say 20 and, 40, you should be doing everything you can. And every dollar you get, you shouldn't be going to see the pyramids. Go see the pyramids later, right?
Yeah.
Every dollar you get, you should be rolling that into an investment of some type, right? And in our case, an investment that you can leverage, and an investment that you can scale, right? So that you have lots and lots of people go to work every day and they come home and they give their wages to you, right? And then while you still have time, because it's very hard for, we're going to talk about this right now. Very hard for like a 75-year-old and to start thinking, yeah, I'm thinking about getting into real estate, because I've got different advice for you. If you are, 55, 65, you're going to want very, very different things from real estate. So when you're 20 to 35, you could go and work in real estate to make money, right? But if you're, at the same age group, you go work anywhere, do whatever, make money, but invest in real estate. Okay. Then when you're 40 to 55, because you've been investing in real estate, you might have 10, I don't use the word doors. I think it doesn't tell me very much, but we'll use it for the purposes of this chat. You might have 10 doors or 20 doors, right? And that's enough to cover all of your expenses. But you might have $2 or $3 million worth of equity built up in those doors. That just happened by the magic of real estate, right? And then you can start using that equity to add more doors, right? So you don't need to save any more for down payments or deposits. You just use your equity that's now self-perpetuating. So that's that semi-passive, that liberating semi-passive period that I feel I'm in, where, I will take the equity that I have in deals and I'm continue to buy and add to my portfolio, but just at a pace, not at a flipper's pace where I used to buy 100 houses a year. Now I might buy like 7, but I'm not selling anything. I've no appraisals, I've no inspections, I just buy them and fix them all up nice. And we put a nice tenant in there and, move on maybe to the next one if I feel like it, and not to the next one if I don't, right? But it's semi-passive. And each time I put one on the ledger, my income goes up a little bit, right? But so between 45, let's say, and 55 or 60, that's a really nice way to live your life. You have your income coming in from your rentals. You have your equity from your rentals that allows you to keep on adding, let's say 2 or 3 doors a year, whatever it might be, whatever works for you, right? But you got to be super present with your kids, because that is your biggest, there's a fabulous podcast I listen to called Desert Island Discs. And it's been a radio show on the BBC since the 1950s. And they interview very famous scientists, writers, actors, musicians, politicians, and anybody who's got a high profile. And they asked them, 8 questions about, what's their favorite music, and what are the 8 songs that they would quote unquote bring to the desert island. And they play the 8 songs, and the guest will tell a story as to why they brought these songs. But on the way out, the final question of Desert Island Discs to all of these people is, okay, so you're on the desert island, you're on your own, and you're going to be there now for the rest of your life. What is it that you will miss most from your world? Okay. And no matter who it is, no matter what fame or fortune that people have achieved in their lives, there's one common thread I hear over and over and over again, and I've listened to maybe 1,000 episodes of this, and that is that they will miss their kids, right? And that tells me something, because when you have kids and they're young, like, you love them deeply, but shit, they are hard work. I mean, they're not easy. I know a lot of parents, and we're all hanging in by our fingernails, right? And so to have the time to not be absolutely pulled apart, because the kids will use every ounce of your energy and every ounce of your time. And so if if work and making money is your priority during their really needy years. Their really needy years are like 0 to, let's say 14, right? They need you less then. They've got their friends and they've got their, they need they need less of your attention. But for those 10 or 11 or 12 or 13 years, the ability to have that time, they don't need all of your time. So that's why I said semi-passive. You can work part-time in real estate, right? And then we move to a different phase about real estate. So, and this is, I've leaned into this heavily, and we're going to be doing a lot more of this in the future. There's a lot of real estate investors out there. They've made a lot of money. A lot of people out there, not even real estate investors, a lot of people out there that made a lot of money, and they've done well. They sold their businesses. They've left their jobs, big retirements, or they've nest eggs, or they got an inheritance, or something along those lines. But they're 55 to 75. They no longer want to take the risk, if you will, of owning real estate or the hassle of it. But they just want income. And this is where real estate, the magic of real estate just keeps on giving, right? So rather than be the flipper who's just flipping real estate, or rather being the investor who's sitting on and owning real estate and managing it and dealing with the tenants and toilets and all that, you can just move over and be the lender, right? And there's a certain point in your life where, you can make 9-10% actual real mailbox money. So you sell all your real estate. I'm just going to choose a number, $2 million. And then you put that $2 million into a 9% return that comes in your inbox every month. Just hits your bank account. You do nothing whatsoever. And that is where a lot of people end up in real estate when they're looking for retirement income. So real estate is an absolute chameleon in that it can come in and, in your 20s and 30s and make you money, make you right now money. It can, in your 40s or in your 30s and 40s and 50s, it can liberate you to be with your kids but it keeps on making you wealthier. And then when you're ready to just completely hang up your boots, you just become the lender. And that is what so many people do. That's the journey. And so at that point in time, when your kids are in university, or your kids need, their expenses are getting a little bit higher, or whatever it might be, because it's later on in life that they're getting higher, you can just take all of your real estate, cash it in, put it into your debt fund, and get $75,000 a month for doing nothing. I've been doing this for quite a while, and the more I talk to my personal investors and people who I work with, the more I see, these people who are less risk adverse, but they really just want income. They just convert. The strategy just changes again. Instead of being the flipper or the owner, I'm just going to be the lender. And that's just eye-opening. So look, what are the conclusions here today, Clark? We talked about by 18, you'll have spent 90% of the time you want with your kids. So that's pretty profound, right? So when I talk to my parents, I talk to other parents whose kids have left, they're grown up. So many parents tell me that, it goes so fast. Blink your eyes and it'll go so fast. And so every person who's been a parent will tell you that. And the second thing a lot of people have told me over the years is like, yeah, I wish I wasn't so stressed. I really wish I had because I was right in the midst of all the craziness of being in my 20s or 30s, or even 40s, and I was just busy, but I wasn't really there. And as I say, parenting is super, super hard. It takes everything from you. So what is your takeaway as we roll out the door here, Clark, in that what kids are, how they impact your life, and how we have used real estate to be that liberator, if you will? What do you have to say about that? Like, what do you want to say in conclusion to this? Because I'm the living example of it, of thank goodness I have real estate and I know real estate, and I thank my lucky stars that I've been just fortunate enough to be in this position. What do you have to say about that as a parent, I should say? What do you feel about that, Clark?
Yeah, I appreciate the buckets, and I always think it's important to kind of understand which bucket you're in, and it reminds me of conversations I've had where we would take David, me and you are together, and we're taking investors around, and we're touring them around houses in St. Pete or Tampa or wherever we were at, and you're talking to the 45-year-old, and we're talking to them, we're like, hey, this is close to downtown, it's going to go up, they're going to build a bunch of new cool stuff around here. And all the 45-year-olds are like shaking their head like, yeah, I can see that. Like 5 years from now, this place is going to be like a gold mine.
Yeah.
And then I look over at like the 66-year-old and they're like, yeah, but how much money does it make again? I'm like, it doesn't really cash flow very well. It probably will just break even. And they're like, yeah, I don't care about 10 years from now. I'm going to be 76. And that's not something that I really care about, the gold mine or the new Publix, the new supermarket that's going in. And they're like, wait, it makes how much again? And I'm like, yeah, it makes like $50 a month. They're like, yeah, what else you got? And I'm like, okay, you're in a different bucket, right? And so that it's funny you mentioned the lending where it's like, well, hold on, you can make 9 or 10% starting day one, and I don't have to, figure out how to, source lend, going out and leveraging my 25% down, and then worry about the property manager and what if the tenant doesn't pay, and what if this is an old house, I see it's renovated nicely, but what happens if the plumbing goes bad? Like, I don't tell me any more about that, tell me about the lending thing. So it makes me laugh is to like see the different, watching a 45-year-old or a 25-year-old look at an opportunity, and then looking at a 65-year-old, and it's like it's the same exact opportunity in the same location with the same renovation, and you've got three totally different like looks on their face. So but in conclusion, I look back, I don't have kids, so it's just harder for me to truly understand my presence in their lives, because they don't exist yet, and I do hope to have kids someday. But I can look back at my own life growing up, and my parents were very involved in me growing up, right? They went to my soccer games, and they sent me to basketball camp, and they made sure I did my homework. And I can tell you right now that on Saturday when I was playing in my soccer games, to this day, I can hear my dad yelling at me from the sideline saying, Clark, get off your ass and start playing better. And guess what I did, David? I started playing better. Like I may have been walking or like, not like cutting corners, whatever you want to call in soccer. And when I heard him scream from the stands, I shot off like a rocket, right? And that's because my parents were able to be present, right? And so that helps. And I knew that like maybe I wouldn't have to do the homework if they weren't like watching me. So I kind of knew it was like, hey, I need to do my homework before I want to go outside and play or shoot basketball or whatever I wanted to do. But if they weren't present, if they were distracted all the time, I think kids understand you can get away with things very, very quickly, and you can keep pushing those boundaries. And if no one kind of draws the line in the sand and says, you need to do that you need to do this before you get to go out and get rewarded for whatever it is, then eventually it impacts you, as an adult, and you start to delay things, and you start to not doing the hard things because they're tough, and I think ironically a lot of our podcast is about delaying gratification. And what does that mean? That means doing things that are tough today so that you can benefit going forward. But if you kept growing up where there weren't a lot of rules and there weren't a lot of people, a lot of eyeballs on you, and there's not a lot of focus on you, and you just you were just eating that candy all day, because that's what I don't want to eat the dinner. Just give me a bunch of candy, and no one's, everyone's looking the opposite way. That turns into a lot of adults that are probably not as mature as they should be financially, socially, maybe. So again, I know I think people may, when they're reading the title, like, oh, parenting and real estate, how in the hell, that's oil and water, right? That's not peanut butter and jelly. But hopefully you've been able to take some ideas to understand that parenting and being able to invest passively in real estate from a younger age, I mean, the direct correlation is scary. And it could mean that you're going to be able to have your kids grow up much more successfully along with you and leaving a lasting legacy. So David, I'll sign off on that. What about you? Give us your 2 cents.
my conclusion is, if you're, in your 20s and 30s, you can do whatever you want, and knock yourself out, take all the risks in the world,
Yeah.
please do, you know. But if you're still in your mid 40s and you're, or you're like even if you're in your late 30s and you're still pontificating, I don't think this is a good time to invest. I don't think this is this. I don't think that. What you're really saying to yourself is, I don't give a shit about my future, and excuse my language, but you don't, and you are kind of, you might say that to yourself, I don't think this is a good time. What you're actually saying is like, no, I just want to be safe right now. I just don't want to take that quote unquote risk. We're not selling anything here. So, take this advice or turn it off.
Or
It
don't.
makes no difference to us, But bottom line is that when you're out there and you're kind of telling yourself, no, it's not a good time, all you're really doing is making yourself feel better today about, how smart and wise you are. But there is a time that there's a price to be paid for that largesse, that at some point in time, when you have kids, and particularly when your kids really, really need you. You mentioned something very interesting right there. When I was talking to my wife earlier on, when I told her we were thinking about recording an episode about kids and real estate, and I was talking about my own childhood, and my mom was a headmistress of a school. So you would think I was like, I absolutely positively had a head start, educationally. My mom was a hard ass. My mom she'd like kick your ass upstairs to do your homework. But I got upstairs, in my house, close the door.
How's it?
She's like, you don't come down here for an hour. I'm like, okay. I just dicked around in my room for like, I don't know how many years, right? Listen, making mixtapes and piercing my ear and, just doing like dicking around, right? But I never did any homework. Do you know why? Because my mom I was one of 5 kids for a start, so I'm not bragging on her, but she was out there saving the universe as well at the same time. But my mom was super busy and she never sat down with me, right? And that's not sad. I'm just telling you what happened, right? And it's the time you can tell your kids, go out there and do your homework. Yeah, that's not cutting it. You're going to have the time to peacefully go out and sit down and say, okay, what are we working on?
Yeah.
What are we working on here? So do you fully grasp the concept of what we're working on here, in terms of homework? And to have the peace and the space generally to do that. Or you mentioned your dad was always at your football games, your basketball games. And it is amazing when you see, particularly American parents, I think it's just incredible to watch just how they always get there, right? But it's the amount of stress that you went through and under to get there. If you can just, I think little Johnny's playing now and in an hour, I'll take a wrap up what I'm doing and I'll walk over. You can get there like that. And you can always be at, your son or daughter's game. That's amazing, right? That's real estate in a way, right? But if you are like, I don't think I can get out, my boss is going to roll his eyes. If you if you're feeling super guilty, or you're running late and you're stressed out of your mind just to get to the game, and you're an amazing parent if you can do that, by the way. If you're that parent, go you, right? I'd love to hear from you, number one. But if that is you, there is a message that we're trying to put out here today. And that is, never ever defer investing in yourself, in your skills, upgrading your skills towards freeing yourself financially. Doesn't have to be full time. Understand your expenses. Try and have passive enough income that covers those expenses so that you can be present during the hardest job you will ever do in your life, ever. And that is being a parent. And so the conclusion is, real estate is not just some snake oil that we go out and try and sell. And if you think it is, if you think it's just everybody in real estate, some Shylock or some Grinch who's out to ruin your day, you're wrong. Real estate investors, and all the real estate investors I know, have one fundamental objective, and that is to free themselves so they can live life on their own terms. And what that means isn't always I can be on Instagram, at the top of a mountain. A lot of times it's like I'd be sitting beside my daughter, helping her with her math problem.
Yeah.
And with that, that's why I
Well,
invest in real estate.
there you go. I'm not going any further than that. Well, that was perfect, David. I genuinely appreciate that. If you appreciated this episode, we took a little different turn on this one. So, if you have any feedback or if you have any of your own stories with your own kids, or maybe some things that maybe this struck a chord with you, is that maybe you're not as present, or maybe you have ideas, we'd love to hear from you. Burn Your Boats Wealth on all the social media channels. Apple Podcasts and Spotify. We appreciate, 5-star review if you think it's 5-star worthy. And also too, we've talked a lot about wealth creation through buying passive investments. Guys, and David, we've started a free mastermind on School, SKOOL. And you can go on there and go to Burn Your Boats and basically be able to, there's videos to show you how to walk through getting your first rental and get to your first 5 rentals as quickly as possible. There's a community on there with other folks that are all in the same kind of place that you are, in terms of maybe they own 1 rental or 2 rentals, but they're still trying to learn how to get to that more meaningful amount where your life starts to change a little bit. And we do it as a community. David and I are doing, happy hour, kind of like digital happy hours every week, where we're going to talk about what's going on, topics that we care about. We can help answer your questions or challenges that you have. We just want to keep providing as much value as possible through this kind of free mastermind. And then also too, we provide opportunities. So if we have deals that we can offer to you, or if we have lending opportunities, maybe you might need some money. So we want to be able to continue to keep giving you as many tools as possible to be as successful as possible. So with that, David, I think you said it perfect. And I think we'll see everyone next time. And thanks for joining us.
You've been listening to the Burn Your Boats podcast with Clark Lunt and David Shaw. We would love to hear from you. Please reach out at burnyourboatswealth.com with comments, questions, and if you have a topic you would like Clark and David to discuss on an upcoming episode. We would very much appreciate it if you took the time to rate and review Burn Your Boats podcast on your favorite podcast listening app, and make sure to follow and share on social media. Content in Burn Your Boats podcast is for entertainment purposes only and is not legal or financial advice. Please review our legal disclaimer at burnyourboatswealth.com. Thank you for listening.